those of us, and you've done more of it than most, who have been the independent anything, whether reviewer, monitor, inspector, or whatever it happens to be, I'm sure you'd agree, have to be conscious every single day of the danger of being co-opted by that which you're inspecting, reviewing, or monitoring. Do you feel that there is a danger? Do you feel that there is evidence of the danger being reached, that advocates and others who look after who are there to look after the voices of young people may have been co-opted, and that we need to do some work, perhaps through the YJB, to improve this system?
Well, I think with respect to people involved, and if I talk about my own work, there's always a danger. There's always a danger. There's a danger that people in the inspectorate become co-opted. There's a danger that advocates become co-opted. There's a danger, anyways, in that situation. There is always a danger. And I think often people go into these situations because they want to be helpful. You know, and then they want to be helpful to the institution. It's not a kind of match. So you do have to, I think, sort of patrol the boundaries of independence very rigorously indeed. So I think for people in advocacy, I certainly think that would be something that would be sensible to look at. Not because I'm saying I've got my own starting now to look at this year, and I've got evidence to say there's a problem, but clearly there is always that risk for any of these independent type organisations, as you yourself say.
Now, your post has a very fine reputation for independence. You've told us that you do not inspect the STCs. Do you have any comment to make about the desirability of a similar process, possibly by you, taking place in STCs to ensure that STCs come to the higher standards too?
Well, I think it would be desirable for us to be involved in the inspection of STCs. I mean, I'm very clear about that. At the moment, STCs are inspected by Ofsted. We work very successfully with Ofsted in our inspections of prisons. That's a good partnership. And if we looked at the approaches we might take to STCs, I think there would be a good deal of overlap that would create scope for us working together. There are differences though, and we're in some discussion to see whether it's possible to work through those differences. And at their crudest, I would say it's about what you think you're inspecting. So I don't think STCs aren't schools or colleges that happen to be secure. They're prisons in which education and training takes place. I think that's our area of expertise, and I think we would have something of that. And the other kind of difference of emphasis, I think, with Ofsted, it's not a tremendous difference of emphasis, is I think for them the bottom line is the effectiveness of the establishment. For us, the bottom line is the outcome for the young people. And actually those two things, again, there's an overlap, there's considerable overlap between those two things, but they aren't quite the same. And so we need to have some more discussion with Ofsted to see whether there are differences in our approach, those can be bridged.
If anyone in the body of the Kirk, as it were, would like to put any questions to Mr. Hardwick through me, I shall moderate them. Please raise a hand and I will take your question. Of course, alongside Ofsted, yourselves, there is the whole question of inspections by local authorities in relation to child protection. It's sometimes asserted by private individuals, by parents and foster parents, that child protection set a fairly low bar. Is that so in relation to YOIs and STCs, or do you think that there are double standards here, if you'll forgive the loaded question?
I do think a good phrase is they set a low bar. So I think there are, on the whole, I think it's our experience that generally appropriate referrals are made to the local authorities, so Carlile team. And I think their view of whether there's something that I think they would take a different view. I think they are more accepting of occasions when staff use force against young people than they would be force sharing, use against violence, use against young people in other situations, the same degree of violence but in other situations. So I think there is a risk that the bar is too high for intervention. I think, and it's like, and again, I don't think that's about saying we ought to, it's about our mixed messages that we talked about before, the ambiguities in those, that we ought to take the view that violence or force against a young person in a very vulnerable situation is the most serious matter, and it can only be justified in the most unusual circumstances, and that ought to be the context in which we see it.
If you're right that the use of restraint remains